Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. I'm on the road right now, heading down to Pubcon Austin, and we've got an awesome video for you this week. Since I'm heading down to Pubcon Austin, we figure, hey, this is the best time to share my entire presentation on local search success. So check it out. It's a little bit longer this week, but it's going to be an incredible video packed with tons of local search tips. Here we go.
This is Dominic Toretto's Furious Guide to Local Search in 2020, and if you want to download the slides, you can get them at the link right there. Hey, I'm Greg, the Vice President of Search for SearchLab, and you want to make sure you check out our weekly video series on our blog. It's super awesome and packed with local SEO tips. And I speak at a ton of conferences all over the world, and I see a lot of really bad presenters, the kind of guys that stand behind the podium with their back kind of turned to the crowd, and all they do is read their slides, and even worse, the slides are just a white background with black text and Arial font, and it's just bullet point after bullet point that they're reading. And because of that, I firmly believe that bullet points kill kittens, so this will be a kitten-safe presentation. And you obviously notice the Fast and the Furious reference there at the beginning. Every time I do a presentation, there is a movie theme, and today's movie theme is car movies. Any movie where cars play a significant role in the plot of the movie, and we've got 88 car movies referenced in today's presentation. And I usually go back and include a movie for every year in the last 50 years for the theme, but today we're going back for the last 58 years so we can include every James Bond movie. So with the older stuff that you haven't seen, there is attribution over to the side, so not only will you learn some cool stuff about local SEO, you'll get a list of cool movies to go and watch later. So why the long face? Are you spending too much time looking up at competitors that rank higher in local searches? Are you wondering, dude, where's my site? Maybe you're hanging on for dear life to the rankings that you've got, or maybe you're feeling like you're murdered by your competitors in the rankings. Today I'm going to give you a peek underneath Google's hood so you'll understand how local search rankings work. And I've got a lot of tips that are for your eyes only. I'm going to show you how to jump out and grab attention so that your sites will capture more customers. And just like a fat guy in a little coat, I'm going to squeeze in a ton of information and helpful tips for you today. So let's start by talking about what local search actually is. It's anytime you do a search and you see a map pack, or if you click more places at the bottom of the map pack, it takes you to the local finder page. Or you could search directly on Google Maps, or it's also the localized organic listings that show up in standard search results. Lots of businesses out there need local SEO, but they don't really know what it is, and they've not really ever heard of it. Any business that has a physical location or that serves customers in a particular area, like an electrician or a plumber, needs to be doing local SEO because that's what applies to those businesses. Local SEO is a lot more complicated, and it includes additional signals that traditional SEO doesn't really pay attention to. And it's more complicated because the things that work in one city or metro area won't necessarily work in another. The things that you do in a really crowded area like Dallas or Chicago or LA are completely different than the things you do for the same kind of business in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. And it's more complicated because the things that work in one vertical don't necessarily work in another. The things that you do for a car dealer are completely different than what you do for a plastic surgeon or for a jeweler. And Google has evolved, and lately at conferences we hear about entity-based ranking and how it's the next big thing, but those of us in local kind of just shrug it off because local has always been entity-based search. In fact, in local search, you can get a business to rank well even if it doesn't have a website. And we know that Google is tracking location history if you're using an Android device or if you've got an Apple device with Google Maps. That's how it populates the little graph that shows you when businesses are most popular and if there's going to be a wait. So what should you do? Encourage in-person visits. Optimize that real-world entity signal. Get people to show up at your location to show Google that you're a popular business. And in fact, just a few months ago, Google got a patent for using quality visit scores as a ranking signal. And what is that? Well, a quality visit score is defined in the patent as the number and or frequency of repeat visits by one or more individuals to a physical location. So it's really come full circle. We need to be building our brand with old school marketing. Doing the things in the real world to expose our business to the community are going to lead to SEO success in the future. Now, today I'm not going to retread the basics of local. I talk about that stuff all the time. And if you are a noob and you want to know more about the basics of local, I did a presentation at Learn Inbound in Dublin last fall, and you can get the slides right here. It's a really great presentation that walks through optimizing the page, doing link building, things like that. Now, today I'm just going to hit a few high points, but then I'm going to share really specific tips for certain situations. So let's start off looking at inbound link signals. Local links are pure gold. When we're talking the local algorithm, you really want to make sure you're getting links from local websites and local entities. And if you get involved in the local community, it's really easy to get those local links. It's also important to ask the right questions when you're onboarding clients to make it easier to get these local links. So I'm sharing our onboarding questionnaire. You can download it at that bit.ly link right there. It's a nice questionnaire that talks about what the business does in the community and how they prioritize their community involvement. It gives you a lot of low-hanging fruit for local link building, so it's really awesome. You should check it out. Talking about content side of things, make sure that your content's actually about your business and actually about the local area. This is something we see all the time where it's just kind of generic fluff content that looks the same on all the different competitors' websites. So one test that we use, if you can change your business name and the city that you're located in, could you take your content and throw it on a competitor's site in a different city, or even a non-competitor site in a city across the country? Does the content still work if you're just changing the name in the city? If it does, then it's wrong. It should be so uniquely about your business in your area that you can't use that content on any other site. Another tip that we like to use is reading the content out loud, physically speaking the content out loud. Everything should sound conversational. It should sound like something that you say face to face to a consumer that just walked in your front door. If it doesn't sound conversational, then it's wrong. And when you read it out loud, you hear when you're stuffing these keywords where maybe reading through it you don't catch. But when you read it out loud, it sounds awkward. So make sure that everything sounds conversational. Moving on to citations, which used to be a really big deal in local search, and now they're really just kind of table stakes. It's a foundational signal, and it's really not as important as it was even just a few years ago. You don't need the big numbers of citations like you did in the old days. In fact, you really just need a couple of sites. We really tell people just to worry about the citational sites that customers might potentially see. So if you do a search for your business name in Google and look at any citation sites that show up in the first 3 pages of search results, that's really all you need to be worrying about. And moving on to reviews. Reviews are really important to humans, but they're also incredibly important to Google's algorithm, and they continue to gain more weight every year. So you should really be paying attention to your reviews. You want to make sure that it's easy for customers to leave a review. Typically, we're going to suggest setting up a page that says, hey, thanks for doing business with us. Let us know how we did. And put that on a really simple URL like domain.com/reviews. So it's easy for everyone in the company to understand where they need to send customers to leave reviews. And then you want to make sure you're asking every single customer. And finishing up talking about some quick tips on Google My Business. You want to make sure you don't add keywords to your business name. It's really spammy out there nowadays, and a lot of people are adding those keywords to try to show up better, but you can get penalized and get your listing suspended, so you don't want to do that. Now, Google changed the rules last year that you're now allowed to use a tracking number, and you absolutely should, so that you can get credit for all of those organic phone calls that you're getting when you're showing up better in searches. So you want to put your tracking number as your primary number in Google, and list your local number as one of the alternate numbers. And you want to make sure you're using Google Posts to stand out. It's basically free advertising. And like I said, I'm not going to dive into the basics. So if you want more in-depth info about Posts, I did a presentation at MozCon last summer. You can get the slides right here. It really walks through the ins and outs of Posts and why they're awesome and how to excel using Posts to make your business stand out and get more conversions. But what's really important is optimizing what shows up in the post thumbnail. Most people only worry about the image and the full post, but for success, you really need to pay attention to what shows up in the thumbnail when it's the smaller image and just a few lines of text. And image cropping makes that really difficult because it's super wonky. It's different all the time, and it's actually a different size between desktop and mobile. You can see here the desktop crop is actually vertically taller. There's more pixels in the vertical axis than there is in the mobile crop. And if you want better control I've got something that's going to help you. We've created a Photoshop guide. You can download the PSD right there at that link, and the PSD looks like this. So anything inside of that white grid, which is a separate layer in Photoshop, anything in that white grid is going to be safe from getting cropped when it crops to the thumbnail view. Now, you might possibly see a little bit above the grid or a little bit below the grid, but anything in the grid will always be safe, so you can be sure that your important image elements are inside the grid for the thumbnail view, and the rest of the image becomes visible when they click to see the full post. Now, if you're fighting GMB spam, you're going to have a really difficult time lately because Google seems to not care as much. There's a lot of spam out there. It's really difficult to fight it. But you want to make sure if you're fighting just keyword stuffing in a Google My Business name, it's a legitimate location, but they've got keywords stuffed in the name. You don't want to use Google's business redressal form. Google's just going to ignore that request. So if you are fighting keyword spam in the name, you've got to report each listing individually. So go in and suggest and edit and change the name to what it should be. But if you are fighting a completely fake location, that's when you want to use the redressal form. And it's a big, long URL, so I shortened it into this bit.ly link so that it's easier to get to. But if you go in and report the fake location at that form, you'll be able to get that location pulled down. Here's a cool trick. A lot of people want to see what their competitors have chosen as categories because sometimes that helps their competitors outrank them. So what you want to do is go do a search for your competitor on Google Maps. And then you want to right-click by the top line info and then select View Source. So just there in the empty white space next to the business name, right-click and say View Source. And when you're doing this, pay attention to, in this case, it says Ford dealer. Underneath the stars, it's going to list the primary category. You want to remember what that primary category is. Once you've selected View Source, you want to hit Control F and then search for the primary category. It's going to be the third iteration of that category in that source code because the first two appear by reviews. So that third iteration will be the beginning of their category list, and you can see all of the other categories listed directly after that category. It's a really cool trick to see what your competitors have chosen and see kind of how they're thinking and what they're doing in their SEO strategy. Nested department listings are also really, really cool things you can use in Google My Business if you've got a situation where you've got separate departments that would need separate listings. So it'll look like this. This is an example of a nested service listing for a car dealership. You can see when you look at the service center, it shows that it's located inside of the main listing. Now, the big benefit here is in the main listing, instead of having the standard drop-down arrow just to see the rest of the hours, it says see more hours. And when you click on it, it aggregates all of the hours from the different departments. So it really solves the problem. If you have different department hours, customers will no longer be confused because they'll be able to see the various hours on the main listing. It's a really, really helpful tip to be able to go do this. So Google calls these relations because it likes to come up with different names. Who knows why they can't just call it a nested listing or a department listing. If you want to do this with one of your listings, you want to go to the department listing, the sub listing, the child listing, and click suggest and edit. And then once you do that, there's going to be an area where it shows the map pin in the map, and just underneath that, there's a field called located within. It looks like this. You want to type in the name of the parent listing, the main listing that you want that department listing to appear under. And pro tip, if you move the map pin slightly, you'll typically get instant approval. Otherwise, it may take a few days for the approval to happen. Now, if you've got a lot of these that you need to handle for multi-locations, or you just can't take the time to do it yourself or can't figure it out, you can also contact Google My Business support through Twitter and ask them to set up the relation for you. And this is really easy. If you've got a big list, they can handle it all at one time. Now, keywords and customer reviews will help you rank for those keywords, but unfortunately, you can't really tell customers what to write because it's against Google's terms of service to tell people what to write, and it's actually against federal law to tell people what to write in a review. But you can suggest what makes a helpful review, and that's typically going to subliminally encourage people to use certain keywords. So on that reviews page that you're setting up, you can say something like this. Hey, if you're not sure what to write, the best reviews offer more specific details and helpful tips. Here's a few questions that might help. Did you buy a new car or a used car? Boom, right there, they're going to say whether they bought a new car or a used car, or what make and model, or what city do you live in? Well, hey, I live in this other city, but I drove to the city that I bought the car in because it was a better deal. So ask certain leading questions, and people will tend to leave those reviews with keyword-rich review text to help you show up more often for those phrases you want to show up for. And a lot of people always ask about getting negative reviews removed from a Google My Business listing. Now, this is an example of a really bad review that one of our clients got. It's for an adoption agency, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's awful, but Google wouldn't have removed the review. But at the bottom, it says, "Don't give your child to the racist white people." Because of that, it classifies as hate speech, which is not allowed in Google reviews. So it was really easy to get this review removed. Now, Google's only going to remove reviews in a very few specific situations. You want to check out the list of prohibited or restricted content. There's a link right there that takes you to all of the content that Google's not going to allow in reviews. And basically, you can hit each of these drop downs here to really read what's listed. And it's, really not that often you're going to be able to get a review removed. But for certain situations, like a clear case of extortion, if a customer tells you, "I'm going to go leave a bunch of bad reviews on a bunch of different platforms if you don't give me a refund," that's a clear case of extortion. And if you have that email or that text message or a recording of that phone call, you can send it to Google and they'll remove those bad reviews that are a result of that. Or clear cases of media attention. The one that everyone loves to use is the dentist that killed Cecil the lion. Even years later is still getting bad reviews saying he's a lion killer. Obviously, those were not actual patients or customers. So anytime media attention leads to reviews from non-customers, Google's going to remove those. Or if the review is clearly from an ex-employee. Now, a lot of businesses think that this is happening, but you can't really prove it. Now, if it says in the review, "I used to work here," and boom, right there, that shows it's an ex-employee. Otherwise, it's got to be public record. So something like LinkedIn that shows that that employee worked there previously. That's a pretty easy way to prove to Google that the person was an ex-employee and get those reviews removed. It's really important, too, to finish up here, to pay attention to Google questions and answers. It's a new messaging platform that's actually a part of Google Maps, but it shows up in your Google My Business profile. And while most people think that it's a messaging system to allow people to ask a question to the business, it's really a community discussion feature. So anyone can ask your business a question, and anyone in the community can answer that question for you. Now, if a question gets 3 upvotes, it's going to show natively in your Google My Business panel instead of just showing the link to questions and answers, like this one right here for Hippie Hollow, the nudist beach just outside of Austin. The question shows, "Is there nudity?" And the answer is, "Of course." Now, that's probably on brand for them, so that's not necessarily a problem, but you should pay attention for your brand. If perhaps there's something that's been upvoted enough, you want to make sure that it's a question that really is a great first impression, a good question and answer that's going to help, and not something that's goofy or funny, because you want to make sure that people get a better first impression. And answers work the same way. You can get multiple answers for a question, but the answer with the most upvotes shows as the primary answer to the question. And a lot of studies have been done and shown that a good portion of the questions that have been asked in the questions and answer section are actually sales leads. It's people that have something that they need help with, or they need help making their purchase decision. And a lot of businesses aren't answering these questions, so you don't want to miss out on sales opportunities either. And the really cool thing is Google allows you to upload your own questions. So you can set up what we call a pre-site FAQ page. Load in the most common questions that you get from potential customers, and then go in and answer those questions yourself. And you've got a really nice FAQ section there. Now, what's cool about this is you've got a direct line to Google's entity database. When you're putting in your own questions and answering your own questions, you're providing very specific, detailed questions and answers about your business entity directly to Google. So you want to make sure you're doing it. And now, when someone comes in to start to type a question, both on mobile and desktop, Google's going to auto-suggest an answer to that question if it's similar to another question that's already been answered in the past, or similar to something that's been answered in a past review. And it's pretty likely in the future that this content is going to start feeding voice search answers. When someone asks a question on voice search, that's the same question that's already been entered in the Q&A section and answered in the Q&A section. Again, direct feed to Google. There's no reason they won't start to use that as Q&A content on voice search. So make sure you're ahead of the game and you get that stuff filled out. So finishing up here, we're going to talk about some fun examples. I love to show this one. This is obviously blown up from the real size on the screen, but we see this all the time where people think it's a messaging platform. So they say, hey, what's your phone number? Even though the button that you have to click to ask a question is just maybe an inch away from the actual phone number. And on mobile, it's a clickable phone number. Or they could even click through to your website to get your phone number. But people think this is messaging, so they're not going to do that. And notice this one was for a car dealer, and it's got a service issue, and the dealership didn't answer the question. Or this one, not even really a question. Hey, your website sucks. And the guy says, yeah, I'm not a fan of it either. We all kind of laugh at that, but that's not really a very good impression for that dealership. And they probably have some problems with their website that they need to address. This was a great one. I did a presentation last year in Austin at Google headquarters, and I always try to pull local examples, and this was one of the ones that I pulled where it asked, does South Point have a body shop? And the answer is, don't go here, look at the reviews. I had a horrible experience. They lie to you and everyone else. But notice there's 6 more answers, and the dealership answered. And whenever the business owner answers, it shows owner in parentheses, and this is obviously a much better answer, but the answer that shows is the one that has the most upvotes. So after the presentation, the guy asked me what to do, and we just grabbed a couple of people in the crowd and had them log into Google and go put a thumbs up on this answer, and now this answer shows as the primary answer. So that's why you need to pay attention to these things. This was for SearchLab Boston, and the hotel that the conference was in had the question, how are the room numbers ordered? And this jackhole says alphabetically, and look at his picture. He's totally smug and happy about his answer. And again, it's something we all laugh at, but I guarantee you for the hotel, that's not really a great customer experience. And this is my favorite one ever. It's since been changed, but before this guy thought he was a comedian and decided to try to make a funnier answer, the question showed up here for the London Eye. This is the big Ferris wheel on the Thames River in London, and the question was, do you have to wear a helmet? And the guy said, you don't have to, but you can if you wish. I believe Viking helmets are a popular choice. Again, we all laugh, but the Coca-Cola London Eye probably did not want that as the primary question and answer that shows in their Google My Business profile. So what you want to do is load in all of your own questions and answer all of your questions and upvote all of your answers so that everything looks like this. It's a much better first impression. So thanks for taking that crazy ride with me today. Now you have the keys to local search success. And when you're thinking about local SEO now, hopefully you won't want to go jump off a cliff. And now you're going to win the race to the top of local search results. So that was Dom Toretto's Furious Guide to Local Search in 2020. There's my Twitter account if you want to follow me on Twitter. I like to tweet at conferences, so you get a lot of live updates. And then there's my email address. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me anytime. I'd love to help. And once again, if you want to download the slides, you can get them at the link right there. And hey, boom, right at the end, I gave you a list of all of the movies that are in the presentation. So if you want to go watch some really cool car movies, there you go.
So thanks for watching the video. We hope you learned something great. And you know what? Now it's that time. I actually pulled over and stopped driving because I didn't feel comfortable doing this while I was driving. But, you know, put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. And don't forget to check back next week when I'm going to be sharing awesome digital marketing tips from all of the speakers at Pubcon. We'll see you next week.